whispers in brushstrokes. The chandelier's crystal droplets scattered light across the gallery like stars against a midnight sky. Olivia Reed stood in the corner, a ghost at her own exhibition, watching as strangers dissected her soul. At 32, she had mastered the art of invisibility while paradoxically displaying her innermost thoughts on canvas for the world to see. "They don't know it's you, do they?" The voice came from behind, rich and deep with a hint of amusement. Olivia turned, her practiced smile faltering when she met eyes the color of stormy seas. The man before her was tall and elegantly dressed in a charcoal suit that screamed wealth without needing to shout. His dark hair was styled with careless precision, a few strands falling across his forehead in what she suspected was a deliberately casual touch. "Mr. Thorne," she said, recognizing the founder of Meridian Technologies. "I didn't realize you were interested in contemporary art." Julian Thorne's lips curved into a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm selective about what captures my attention, Miss Reed, or should I address you as Phantom? That's the name on the exhibition program." A chill ran down Olivia's spine. Few people knew she was the artist behind the Phantom moniker. Her agent handled all public interactions, allowing her to maintain her privacy. "You've done your homework. I make it a point to know who I'm investing in," he replied, gesturing to the centerpiece of the exhibition, a large canvas depicting a gnarled oak tree on a hilltop, its branches reaching toward clouds that morphed into birds taking flight. Beneath the tree lay a small box, partially buried, its contents suggested but never revealed. "You're considering purchasing my work?" she asked, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Julian studied her face, and for a disorienting moment, Olivia felt as though he was searching for something. "I already have. 3 pieces over the past 5 years, to be precise. This will be my 4th. He paused, his gaze shifting to the painting. "The tree appears in all your collections. It must be significant." Olivia's fingers instinctively moved to the pendant at her throat, a small silver key that she never removed. "We all have anchors that keep us from drifting too far from shore." "Indeed," Julian murmured, his expression thoughtful. "The question is whether those anchors tether us to safe harbors or to shipwrecks we should have abandoned long ago." A server passed with champagne, and Julian took 2 flutes, offering one to Olivia. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and something electric passed between them, a recognition that defied explanation. "To anchors, then," he said, raising his glass, "and to the courage it takes to pull them up when necessary." Olivia clinked her glass against his, unable to shake the feeling that she'd met him before. There was something in the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, something in the cadence of his speech that echoed through the corridors of her memory. "Have we met before, Mr. Thorne? Before tonight, I mean." Julian's expression remained neutral, but Olivia caught the subtle tightening of his jaw. "Perhaps in another life, Ms. Reed. Or perhaps we simply recognize something in each other that most people keep hidden." As the evening progressed, Julian remained by her side, their conversation flowing with unexpected ease. He spoke of his company's philanthropic endeavors, his passion for architectural restoration, and his solitary life in a penthouse overlooking the city. Yet, Olivia sensed he was carefully curating his words, revealing enough to seem transparent while concealing what truly mattered. When they parted ways, Julian handed her his card, not a business card with the Meridian logo, but a personal, one with only his name and a private number. "I'd like to commission a piece," he said. "Something specific." "I don't typically do commissions," Olivia replied, though she slipped the card into her pocket. Julian's smile was enigmatic. "Consider it, at least. I have a feeling you'll find the subject matter compelling." As he walked away, Olivia couldn't shake the sensation that her carefully constructed world had just shifted on its axis. She didn't know it then, but that 15-minute conversation would be the first tremor in an earthquake that would shatter every wall she had built around her heart. The Gallery of Memories. For 6 months after their first meeting, Olivia found herself unable to accept Julian Thorne's commission. Something about him unsettled her, not in a threatening way, but like a chord played in a familiar melody that suddenly shifts to a minor key. His request had been simple yet strangely specific, a painting of children's hands exchanging a handmade bracelet against a backdrop of falling autumn leaves. The image had haunted her dreams since he described it, triggering fragments of memories she couldn't quite grasp. A boy's laughter, the scent of cinnamon and apples, and a promise whispered beneath an oak tree. On a rainy Tuesday in October, Olivia finally surrendered to the pull of these phantom recollections. Her studio, a converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and north-facing windows, became her sanctuary as she worked feverishly on Julian's commission. She painted through the night, her brush strokes guided by something beyond conscious thought. When dawn broke, she stared at the finished piece with a mixture of awe and terror. The painting wasn't just good, it was an exact rendering of a memory she didn't know she possessed. "What are you doing to me?" she whispered to the absent Julian, her fingers tracing the initials she had unconsciously painted into the corner of the bracelet, TH and OR. Meanwhile, across the city, Julian Thorne stood before a wall in his private study where 3 of Olivia's paintings hung in a perfect row. Each featured the same oak tree but with subtle variations. In one, a child's red kite was tangled in its branches. In another, a half-buried treasure box peeked from beneath its roots. The third showed the tree in winter, its bare branches stark against a twilight sky, with 2 sets of footprints leading away in the snow. "You found her," said a voice from the doorway. Julian didn't turn to acknowledge his visitor. Vivian Reeves, his maternal aunt and the only person who knew his birth name. "I'm not certain yet." Vivian moved to stand beside him, her silver hair elegantly coiffed despite the late hour. "The symbols are there, Julian. The tree, the buried box, the kite. These were your secrets with her." "These could be coincidences," Julian countered, though his heart raced at the possibility that Olivia Reed was indeed Olivia Reynolds, the girl who had been his only friend, his only solace during those tumultuous childhood years before his father spirited him away and reinvented both their identities. 20 years of searching, and now you hesitate. Vivian placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "What are you afraid of?" Julian's expression remained impassive, but his hands clenched involuntarily. "That she'll look at me and see my father. That she'll blame me for disappearing. That I've built this connection in my mind, and she's simply a talented artist who happens to paint images that resonate with me. Or," Vivian suggested softly, "that she'll recognize you, and neither of you will know how to bridge the years between then and now." The following week, Julian received a call from Olivia's agent. The commission was complete, and Ms. Reed had requested to deliver it personally. Julian arranged for her to come to his penthouse, a space few outside his inner circle had ever entered. He dismissed his staff for the evening, wanting no witnesses to what might unfold. When Olivia arrived, she looked pale but determined, the wrapped canvas clutched in her arms like a shield. Julian led her to the study without preamble, offering her a glass of water that she declined with a shake of her head. "Before I show you the painting," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to ask you something." Julian nodded, maintaining a careful distance between them. "Of course. The commission you requested. It's not a random image, is it? It's a memory." Her eyes, the color of amber in sunlight, searched his face for confirmation. "Why would you think that?" he asked, his tone neutral despite the hammering of his heart. Olivia set the canvas down, leaning it against a chair, and reached into her bag. She withdrew a small, weathered journal with a faded blue cover. "Because I've been drawing this scene since I was 10 years old." She opened the journal to a page marked with a frayed ribbon. "The day after Thomas disappeared." Julian's careful composure cracked as he stared at the childish drawing, unmistakably the same scene he had described for the commission, the same scene that had played in his mind for 20 years. "How did you know to find me?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling. "How did you know I was Olivia Reynolds?" Julian moved to the study wall and pressed a concealed button. A panel slid aside to reveal a hidden alcove where a single item rested on a velvet cushion, a handmade bracelet of woven grass and thread, preserved behind glass. "Because," he said, finally allowing his voice to carry the weight of his truth, "I never forgot the girl who made this for me the day before my father took me away." Olivia's eyes widened as realization dawned. "Thomas?" she whispered, the name a prayer and a question. Julian nodded. The mask of Julian Thorne, billionaire, tech mogul, slipping away to reveal the shadows of Thomas Harrington, the frightened boy who had been ripped from everything familiar. "I go by Julian now, but yes, it's me, Liv." The childhood nickname broke something loose in Olivia. She took a step forward, then another, her eyes never leaving his face. "They told me your family moved to Europe. They told me you were never coming back. My father changed our names, cut all ties. He was running from the law, from my mother, from his debts. He reinvented us both." Julian's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the cost of this confession. "By the time I was old enough to search for you on my own, the Reynolds family had vanished from Willow Creek. I've had investigators looking for years. My mother remarried. We became the Reeds," Olivia explained, closing the distance between them. "I never stopped thinking about you. I kept drawing the tree, our tree, hoping somehow you'd see it and remember." Julian reached out hesitantly, his fingertips brushing her cheek with a gentleness that belied his power. "I recognized it the first time I saw your work in a gallery 5 years ago. I've been collecting the pieces, trying to find the courage to approach you, to be certain it was really you." As tears spilled onto Olivia's cheeks, Julian Thorne, the man who had built an empire on calculated risks and strategic planning, found himself at a loss for what to do next. 20 years of searching, of hoping, had culminated in this moment, and he was terrified of saying the wrong thing, of shattering this fragile reconnection. But Olivia, who had spent a lifetime speaking through her art, found her voice. "Show me the others," she said. "Show me what you've kept of me all these years." Fractured reflections. The revelation of their shared past unleashed a torrent of memories that neither Julian nor Olivia had allowed themselves to fully access for decades. Over the next several weeks, they met regularly, piecing together the fractured mosaic of their intertwined histories. Julian's private chef prepared elaborate meals that went largely untouched as they lost themselves in conversation. They spoke of the oak tree that had stood sentinel on the hill behind Olivia's childhood home, their secret meeting place where they had buried a metal box containing their most precious treasures: a blue marble, a hawk's feather, a smooth river, stone, and 2 halves of a heart-shaped pendant they had broken in solemn ceremony, promising to reunite the pieces someday. "I still have my half," Olivia admitted one evening, pulling a silver chain from beneath her blouse. The jagged edge of the broken pendant glinted in the firelight. "I never take it off." Julian's expression softened as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a matching chain. "Neither do I." When they held the pieces together, the break wasn't clean. Years of wear had altered the edges, but there was no mistaking that they had once been whole. "What happened after your father took you?" Olivia asked, her fingers unconsciously tracing the pendant. Where did you go? Julian's jaw tightened, and he moved to stand by the window, gazing out at the city lights that stretched like a galaxy below his penthouse. Everywhere and nowhere. Prague, Geneva, Singapore, Rio. We never stayed in one place for more than a few months. My father was paranoid, convinced my mother's family was tracking us. Were they? A bitter smile crossed Julian's face. Yes, but not for the reasons he believed. My grandfather was trying to make sure I was safe, not to take me from my father, as he feared. He turned back to face her. My father wasn't an evil man, Liv, just a broken one. The divorce, the custody battle, it shattered something in him. He became obsessed with keeping me, even if it meant sacrificing everything else, including my happiness. Olivia rose from her seat and joined him at the window. And your mother? She died while we were in hiding, Julian said quietly. I didn't find out until years later. Cancer. She tried to find me, to see me one last time, but... He let the sentence hang unfinished in the air between them. I'm so sorry, Thomas. Julian, Olivia corrected herself, still struggling with the duality of the man before her. It's all right to call me Thomas when we're alone, he said, surprising himself with the admission. It's been so long since anyone has called me by that name. Sometimes I forget he existed at all. Olivia hesitated, then reached for his hand. Tell me how Thomas became Julian. The story emerged slowly, like water through cracked stone. After years of nomadic existence, Julian's father had settled them in Vancouver, where he'd found work as an architectural consultant. There, 16-year-old Thomas had discovered computers, teaching himself coding and system architecture with an intuitive brilliance that caught the attention of his teachers. By 18, he was developing security software that outperformed industry standards. When his father died suddenly of a heart attack, Thomas, alone in the world, had used his inheritance to start Meridian Technologies. He'd taken his middle name, Julian, and his mother's maiden name, Thorne, as his professional identity. The company had grown exponentially, fueled by Julian's relentless drive and visionary approach to technology. But something was always missing, Julian confessed, his voice low. Success, wealth, recognition, none of it filled the void. I kept searching for you, hiring investigators every few years, but the trail always went cold. The Reynolds family had vanished. My stepfather's job took us overseas, Olivia explained. London first, then Zurich. I went to university in Paris, studying fine arts. When I returned to the States, I was Olivia Reed, not Reynolds. I never legally changed my name, but all my professional work, my identity as an artist, was established under Reed. Which is why my searches never found you, Julian realized. I was looking for Olivia Reynolds, the girl with chestnut braids who could climb higher in the oak tree than any boy in the neighborhood, who drew pictures that made people feel things they couldn't name. A soft laugh escaped Olivia. I haven't worn braids in 20 years, but I'm still climbing trees in my own way. She gestured toward an invisible horizon. Art is my ladder to places I can't reach otherwise. As dawn approached, casting the penthouse in a pearlescent glow, Julian made a decision that would alter the trajectory of both their lives. He retrieved a small wooden box from his safe, not unlike the one they had buried as children, and placed it on the table between them. There's something I need to show you, he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Something I've never shown anyone. Inside the box lay a stack of yellowed newspaper clippings, legal documents, and photographs. The evidence of a past Julian had locked away but never escaped. As Olivia carefully examined each item, the full picture of what had happened to Thomas Harrington emerged with devastating clarity. His father had fled with him not just because of the custody battle, but because he had embezzled millions from the investment firm where he'd worked, money that belonged to clients, to families who had trusted him with their futures. The scandal had ruined lives, driven at least one investor to suicide. It was this crime that had necessitated their constant movement, their perpetual reinvention. When I learned the truth after his death, I anonymously returned every dollar with interest, Julian said, his voice hollow. I established trusts for the families most severely impacted. But the damage was done. Their lives were altered irrevocably, just as ours were. Olivia looked up from the documents, her eyes filled not with judgment but with profound sadness. You've been carrying this alone all these years. It wasn't a question, but Julian nodded anyway. I built Meridian on principles of transparency and ethical practice, a direct response to my father's legacy. But no matter how much good the company does, I still feel the weight of his choices. The fear that somehow I'll be revealed as the son of Richard Harrington, fugitive and thief. You are not your father's sins, Olivia said firmly, reaching across the table to grasp his hand. You were a child, a victim of his decisions, not an accomplice. Julian's grip tightened on hers. Am I? Every advantage I've had, the international education, the exposure to different cultures, even the drive to succeed, all stemmed from his crime. My empire is built on the foundation of his theft. No, Olivia insisted. Your success came from your own talent, your own vision. You could have squandered your inheritance, continued the cycle. Instead, you made restitution and created something that helps people. Dawn had fully broken now, painting the sky in strokes of gold and rose that reminded Olivia of the paintings she had yet to create. In that moment of perfect light, with the truth finally laid bare between them, Julian made another decision, one that would send shockwaves through the business world and change the course of both their lives. I want to go back, he said suddenly, to Willow Creek, to where it all began. Olivia stared at him in surprise. After all this time? Why? Julian rose, moving to his desk where he tapped a few keys on his computer. A document appeared on the screen, the agenda for the upcoming Meridian Technologies board meeting. Because it's time to stop hiding, he said, adding a new item to the top of the list. Resignation of Julian Thorne as CEO and chairman. It's time to reconcile Thomas Harrington with Julian Thorne. And I can't do that without returning to where Thomas last existed. Olivia's eyes widened as the implications of his words sank in. You're stepping down? Julian, your company is worth billions. Your work is changing the future of technology. You can't just walk away. A smile, genuine and unguarded, transformed Julian's face, making him look years younger, more like the boy she had known. I'm not walking away from my work. I'm walking toward my life. There's a difference. He turned the screen toward her, showing her another document, plans for a new Meridian research campus. And look where I've been planning to build it. The satellite image on the screen showed a familiar landscape, rolling hills surrounding a small town nestled in a valley. Willow Creek, unchanged in its essence despite the passage of time. And there, on the highest hill overlooking the town, stood a solitary oak tree, older but unmistakable. Our tree, Olivia whispered. It's still there. I bought the land 5 years ago, Julian admitted. When I first found your paintings and began to hope. I've been waiting for the right moment to break ground. He came around the desk and knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. Come with me, Liv. Come home. The Bridge of Silence. The board meeting of Meridian Technologies lasted precisely 47 minutes. Julian Thorne, known for his meticulous preparation and strategic foresight, had anticipated every question, every objection, every expression of shock and dismay at his announcement. He presented a comprehensive transition plan, named his successor, his longtime COO, Patricia Winters, and outlined his continued role as principal innovation advisor and majority shareholder. What he had not prepared for was the standing ovation he received when he finished speaking, an unprecedented display of respect from the collection of hardened business titans who occupied the boardroom's leather chairs. "You've earned this, Julian," said Warren Schiff, the eldest board member, as the applause finally subsided. "Few of us ever find the courage to choose personal fulfillment over professional ambition." Julian nodded, oddly moved by the genuine sentiment in the room. "Meridian will continue to thrive. I'm not abandoning the company, merely rebalancing my priorities. The financial markets would react with predictable volatility to the news, but Julian had insulated the company against major disruption. What he couldn't insulate himself against was the media frenzy that erupted as soon as the press release went out. Speculation about his health, his mental state, and his future plans dominated business news channels. Technology blogs published retrospectives of his career, financial analysts debated the impact on Meridian's stock, and tabloids resurrected old rumors about his personal life. Through it all, Julian remained silent, his phone turned off, his penthouse empty. Because as the world discussed Julian Thorne's stunning resignation, Thomas Harrington was on a private jet heading toward the past, with Olivia Reynolds seated across from him. "Second thoughts?" she asked, noting his pensive expression as he gazed out the window at the clouds below. Julian shook his head. "Not about leaving, no, but about what we might find when we arrive." He turned to face her. "Willow Creek won't be as we remember it." "Nothing ever is," Olivia replied softly. "But that doesn't mean it can't still hold what we need." They landed at a small regional airport and drove the remaining distance in a rented car, the familiar landscape gradually emerging as they left the interstate behind. Rolling hills gave way to farmland, then to the outskirts of a town that seemed both smaller and larger than their memories had painted it. Willow Creek had evolved over the decades. New developments on its edges, a revitalized downtown with artisan coffee shops and boutiques alongside stalwart local businesses. But its essence remained. The central square with its Victorian gazebo, the library where Julian and Olivia had spent countless rainy afternoons, the creek itself winding like a silver ribbon through the heart of the town. They checked into adjacent suites at the Willow Creek Inn, a historic building that had been a dilapidated eyesore in their childhood, but was now restored to its original grandeur. After freshening up, they met in the lobby, both visibly nervous about the expedition that had brought them here. "Where should we start?" Julian asked, deferring to Olivia in a way that would have shocked his business associates, accustomed as they were to his decisive leadership. Olivia considered for a moment, then reached for his hand. "Let's walk through town first. Get our bearings before we face the hill." They moved through Willow Creek like ghosts, recognizing echoes of their past in unexpected places. The pharmacy where the soda fountain had once stood, the converted movie theater now housing an indoor farmer's market, the park where they had sailed paper boats after spring rains. Some landmarks were gone entirely, replaced by new structures that bore no relation to their memories. Others remained stubbornly unchanged, as if waiting for their return. "Do you think anyone will recognize us?" Olivia wondered aloud as they paused before the elementary school they had both attended, its brick facade weathered but familiar. Julian smiled wryly. "I doubt it. Thomas Harrington was a skinny kid with glasses and a stutter when he was nervous. And you had uncontrollable curls and knobby knees," Olivia finished with a laugh. "Not exactly our current incarnations." As if summoned by their reminiscence, the school doors opened, and a stream of children burst forth, their shouts and laughter carrying on the afternoon air. Among them was a girl with chestnut braids who ran ahead of her friends, a sketchbook clutched to her chest, so eerily similar to young Olivia that both adults stared in stunned silence. "Time is a circle," Olivia murmured, watching as the girl settled beneath a tree and opened her sketchbook. They continued their pilgrimage through town, stopping for coffee at a cafe that had once been the hardware store owned by Mr. Guthrie, who had always slipped Julian a piece of butterscotch candy when he came in with his mother. The young barista, noting their interest in the building's history, mentioned that the Town Historical Society maintained archives of photographs and documents dating back to Willow Creek's founding. "We should visit tomorrow," Julian suggested, as they left the cafe. "See if there are any records of the Reynolds or Harrington families." Olivia nodded, but her attention had already shifted to the horizon, where the hill rose against the late afternoon sky. "It's time," she said simply. The path to the oak tree was steeper than they remembered, winding through meadow grass that brushed their knees. Neither spoke as they climbed, each lost in private reflection. When they finally crested the hill, the ancient oak stood before them, its massive trunk and spreading branches silhouetted against the setting sun. "It's bigger," Julian observed, his voice hushed with reverence. "We're smaller," Olivia countered with a gentle smile. They approached, the tree slowly circling its enormous trunk, their fingers tracing the rough bark as if reading Braille. On the eastern side, barely visible beneath decades of growth, were the carved initials they had left as children. TH, plus OR, enclosed in a lopsided heart. Julian brushed his fingertips over the carving, a complex emotion passing across his face. "We should have been more respectful to the tree," he said with a rueful smile. "I know better now." "The tree forgives us," Olivia replied, placing her hand over his. "It's still standing, still growing. Our small transgression didn't harm its journey." They settled at the base of the tree, shoulders touching, as the sun began its final descent. The valley below was transformed in the golden hour, every building, every field limned with light that softened edges and forgave imperfections. "Do you remember exactly where we buried the box?" Julian asked after a comfortable silence. Olivia closed her eyes, accessing memories she had preserved through her art for decades. 3 paces from the trunk toward the sunrise, beneath the root that looked like a sleeping dragon. Julian smiled at the precision of her recall. "Shall we see if it's still there?" They moved to the spot Olivia had described, kneeling in the soft earth. The dragon root had grown substantially, now resembling more of a serpent in mid-strike than a sleeping beast. Julian produced a small folding shovel from his backpack, ever prepared, even in this most unstructured of adventures. "Should we?" Olivia hesitated, her hand covering his before he could begin to dig. "What if it's gone, or ruined? Sometimes memories are better left as memories." Julian considered her words, then set the shovel aside. "You're right. Whether the box is still there or not doesn't change what it meant to us." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "Besides, I brought something else." From the pouch, he tipped a familiar object into his palm. A blue marble, its glass, swirled with white like miniature clouds. "My father let me keep only one thing from the box when we left. I chose this." Olivia's eyes filled with tears as she recognized the marble she had given him on his 9th birthday. From her own pocket, she withdrew a smooth river stone, polished by years of handling. "And I kept this. The one you found by the creek and said looked like a perfect skipping stone, but you gave it to me instead." They sat in the deepening twilight, marble and stone clasped in their hands, the physical talismans of a bond that had survived decades of silence and separation. Below them, the lights of Willow Creek began to twinkle on one by one like earthbound stars. "What happens now, Thomas?" Olivia asked, using his birth name deliberately, anchoring them both in this moment of convergence between past and present. Julian turned to face her, his expression more open, more vulnerable than she had seen since their reunion. "Now we decide if we're just revisiting the past or if we're building a future." Canvas of tomorrow dawn broke over Willow Creek with a symphony of birdsong and the distant whistle of the 6:15 train, sounds that had formed the soundtrack of their childhood mornings. Julian and Olivia stood on the balcony of the inn watching. As the town gradually came to life, shopkeepers raising awnings, early risers walking dogs along the creek path, the school crossing guard taking up her position at the corner. "I never thought I'd see this view again," Julian confessed, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. I convinced myself it was better not to look back. Olivia leaned against the railing, her profile gilded by the morning light. Sometimes looking back is the only way to move forward properly, like checking your rearview mirror before changing lanes. Their visit to the Town Historical Society the previous afternoon had yielded unexpected treasures. A newspaper article about young Thomas Harrington winning the regional science fair, a photograph of Olivia receiving an award at the elementary school art show, her childish smile revealing a missing front tooth. The archivist, a retired librarian named Mrs. Holloway, had remembered them both with startling clarity. "Oh, the Reynolds girl and the Harrington boy! Inseparable you two were!" she had exclaimed, peering at them over wire-rimmed glasses. "Such a shame about that messy divorce and him being taken away like that. Your mother was beside herself." Young man. The confirmation that their memories were real, that their friendship had been witnessed and remembered by others, had affected them both profoundly. They had spent the evening in Julian's suite, poring over the photocopies Mrs. Holloway had provided, each artifact triggering cascades of shared recollections. Now, as a new day dawned, they faced the question that had hovered unspoken between them since their arrival in Willow Creek. What came next? "I've been thinking about the research campus," Julian said, setting his coffee mug on the small table between them. "The plans are still in the preliminary stages. There's room for adjustments." Olivia turned to face him, a question in her eyes. "What kind of adjustments?" The original concept was purely technological: laboratories, computing facilities, accommodation for researchers. Julian's gaze was steady, intent. "But what if we expanded the vision? What if alongside the tech hub we created an arts center? A place where scientists and artists could collaborate, where innovation could be driven by the intersection of analytical and creative thinking." A slow smile spread across Olivia's face. "A place where technology and art could inform each other, where the left brain and right brain could work in harmony." "Exactly." Julian nodded, his enthusiasm building. "Meridian's focus has always been on technology that enhances human connection, that makes the digital world more intuitive and accessible. Who better to guide that process than artists who understand how to communicate through visual language, who know how to make people feel? And who better to expand artists' capabilities than technologists who can create new tools, new mediums for expression?" Olivia added, catching his vision and extending it. Julian reached for her hand, his touch gentle but certain. "I'd like you to be part of this, Liv. Not just as a consultant or a featured artist, but as a full partner in the endeavor. Your perspective, your talent, they're essential to making this more than just another corporate research facility." Olivia didn't respond immediately, her gaze returning to the vista below. The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the town square. "And what about us, Thomas? Is this just about the project?" The question hung between them, laden with decades of loss and newfound possibility. Julian moved closer, his free hand lifting to trace the curve of her cheek. "It was never just about the project," he admitted quietly. "From the moment I saw your first painting, the oak tree with the red kite caught in its branches, I've been working my way back to you. Every business decision, every acquisition, every technological breakthrough, they were all means to an end. Stepping stones on a path I hoped would lead me back to the one person who knew me before I became Julian Thorne." Olivia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. And now that you've found her, now I want to discover who we can become together. Julian's voice was steady, but Olivia could feel the slight tremor in his hand. Not just Thomas and Olivia from the past, or Julian and Olivia in the present, but something new, a fusion of who we were and who we've become. Later that morning, they returned to the oak tree on the hill, this time carrying not shovels to unearth old treasures, but architects' blueprints and artists' sketches, the preliminary plans for what would become the Meridian Reed Institute for Technology and Arts. They spread the papers on the ground beneath the ancient tree, weighing the corners with stones to prevent the gentle breeze from carrying them away. The main complex would be here, Julian explained, pointing to a spot in the valley below. But I want to preserve this hilltop. The oak tree remains untouched, protected. A sanctuary, Olivia agreed, her eyes scanning the elegant lines of the proposed buildings. A place for contemplation and inspiration. They spent hours refining the concept, Julian's pragmatic considerations balanced by Olivia's artistic vision. The institute took shape in their shared imagination, a place where the rigid boundaries between disciplines would dissolve, where collaboration would be not just encouraged, but inevitable by design. As the afternoon waned, Julian rolled up the blueprints and secured them in a leather case. Then from his pocket, he withdrew a small box crafted from polished walnut. "There's one more thing I'd like to discuss," he said, his voice suddenly formal in a way that made Olivia smile. "A personal matter rather than a professional one." "I'm listening," she replied, though her quickened pulse suggested she already knew what was coming. Julian opened the box to reveal not a ring, as might be expected, but two halves of a heart-shaped pendant, their original childhood tokens, now mounted on a bed of velvet alongside their adult counterparts. "We've carried these pieces separately for 20 years, he said, removing the pendants carefully. "I'd like to join them, not by forcing them together as they once were, but by creating something new from what they've become." He showed her how the four pieces, two original halves, two worn by time, could be arranged to form not a perfect heart, but a more complex, interesting shape, with the negative spaces between the fragments forming an integral part of the design. "A goldsmith I know can join these permanently, maintaining the integrity of each piece while uniting them into a whole," Julian explained. "It would be a symbol of who we are, formed by separation as much as by connection, our identities distinct, but purposefully intertwined." Olivia touched the arrangement gently, understanding the profound metaphor he was offering. "Yes," she said simply. "I'd like that very much." As the sun began its descent, painting the landscape in hues of amber and gold that Olivia itched to capture on canvas, Julian took her hand and led her to the exact spot where they had stood as children, making solemn promises neither fully understood at the time. "Olivia Reynolds," he said, his voice carrying across the hilltop, no longer the whisper of a secret, but the clear declaration of a man who had finally reconciled his fractured self. 20 years ago, we stood in this spot and broke a heart, in two, believing that someday we would bring the pieces back together. Life took us on different paths than we expected, gave us different names, different stories. But it brought us back here, to this tree, to this moment. He knelt on one knee, not with the polished charm of Julian Thorne, tech billionaire, but with the earnest vulnerability of Thomas Harrington, the boy who had found his first true friend beneath the spreading branches of an oak tree. "I'm asking you to join your life with mine, not by becoming who we once were, but by creating something new together. Will you marry me, not as the children we were or even as the adults we are, but as the people we're still becoming?" Olivia's answer came not in words but in action. She knelt before him, their eyes level, their hands intertwined. "I will," she said finally, her voice steady with certainty. "Not because of who we were, but because of who we are, and who we might yet be. As twilight settled over Willow Creek, the oak tree stood sentinel over their renewed promise. Below in the valley, lights winked on one by one, each representing a story, a life in progress. And on the hilltop, two figures remained, silhouetted against the darkening sky, no longer ghosts from the past, but architects of a future neither could have imagined alone. The broken pieces, carried separately for so long, would never again form the perfect whole they once were. Instead, they would become something more complex, more resilient, more true, a testament not to what was lost, but to what had been, found in the silence between then and now, in the space between memory and possibility, in the love that had survived absence and time to emerge, transformed but undiminished, beneath the branches of an ancient oak.